should I start? Okay. 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 So my name is Fernando Spina, and I'm a producer, project manager for Bigfoot Studios. What we do every day is we develop idle games for mobile environments, and we produce our own games, and also we be third-party support for other other projects. Um, Previous to that, I was a game designer for Occam Studios with one released game, which was called oh, I forgot the name, Mr. Bean Around the World, which was based on the animated series with Mr. Bean. Previous to that, I worked in some other companies here in Argentina, always as a game designer. And I started my career in games in 2007 as a bug tester, and from then I kept learning, almost always in Gameloft, when Gameloft had a studio here in Argentina. And then I kept bouncing from studio to studio here in Buenos Aires, always aiming for new projects, new stuff to do, always learning. And these last 5 years, I've also been teaching in the different universities here in Argentina, um, about game design, writing, and project management. I don't know if that's enough, Pablo?
Yes. So my name is Matthieu. I'm based in France. Actually, I'm French too. I'm working currently for a company called Plugin Digital, which is based in Paris, in the south of France. I joined the company about almost 3 years ago, and before that, I used to work as a journalist for a website called Game Cult. That was my main job for 10 years, actually. I used to be a generalist in terms of journalism. Also, before that, I worked for mainstream media, printed press, and I did some intervention in magazines, but like very light columns on some subjects or some specific games. I've been in the video game industry for maybe 15 years or so, something like that. And right now, my main job at Plugin Digital is to scout for interesting projects. So I do a lot of online talks and online chats, mainly with developers, also a bit with publishers, because our company does publishing for studios, but we also provide distribution support to developers and publishers. So we've been in the business for quite some time now. The company started in 2012. And the idea behind Plugin Digital is to have a bit of everything for everyone. So Plugin Digital has been our main brand for many years as a distribution partner. And over the years, because we met so many developers that needed a bit more support than just helping them sell their games once they were finished and ready to be shipped. We started slowly but steadily funding projects, and we also supported in during production, during marketing campaigns, PR, influencers, and everything that you can need to make your game a bit more known in this sea, and I would say even in this ocean of pretty numerous games that are out there.
Okay, so what do I look for in teams and teammates? Ever since I've worked here in Argentina, I've noticed that there's a ton of people that are very talented, but companies always keep failing in the management level. By the time I started working, I didn't know why. Today, I have some clearer idea. But my 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 idea is that uh, here in Argentina, our problematic is that we fail in the teamwork level. It's very hard for us to find leaders. So what I look for in my teams and in my teammates always is, besides uh, the technical expertise, I always look for the human component. I think that's one of the most important things that a team can have, like a good human dynamic, good person, open to criticism, open to dialogue, being able to speak whatever's on your mind, and also be frank and sincere when you have problems or when you need help, or when you want to offer help to someone. I think that has been more so than the technical level that anyone can have or develop or learn. Um, it's a little bit harder to teach and to develop during office hours. So for me, that's what's most important nowadays.
I need it. Yes. The things that we look for in teams, I would say one of the key aspects, as Fernando said, is that the human component and the easiness to work with people should be one of our main criteria. The idea behind Plugin Digital and also Dear Villagers, which is one of our publishing label, is to make sure that people would be happy to spend time with us even outside of the working schedule. When it's possible and when there's not a pandemic going around, we usually try to make all our partners that we publish and that we work with on a long-term commitment to come to our office and share some knowledge and insight, and also some stories behind the company they built around the people who are making it. And that's a very important component. Over the years, we've worked with a lot of different teams remotely or more closely because of the geographical proximity or not. We are actually at the moment expanding a bit in China, for example, because we have opened an office there. And at the very beginning, when we started working in this country, it was very, very hard to understand clearly what was going on, what were the codes to work with people from different cultures. And I guess it's the same for a lot of different countries, because you have sensibilities. Being a European and being in France, of course, I'm much more inclined to know how to interact and work with people from France, from the UK, from Spain, from even Germany. Even if I don't speak all these languages, especially German, which I started to learn, but it's very complicated. But I'm mostly looking to learn more about how other teams in other parts of the world are working and might have other techniques, might have other views also on how to make games. And that's one of the key aspects that I'm looking for as a person and also as a professional. I think you're muted, Fernando.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So, what kind of projects do you think are easier to complete and which are harder? I have never encountered a project that is easy to complete. There's always something that you learn. Usually, yeah, as a continuation of what I was saying, usually, at least for me, I haven't done many projects with the same exact team, the same people. So getting to know each other, getting to constitute the group, and establish the group into working together. Um, that's one of the tricky things, and that's one of the things that, for me at least, even if there are projects that are simpler in its design, um, yeah, I think that there's really no easy project. If you find something easy, I think that maybe you become a little bit complacent at times, and which are harder. Usually, when we work with third parties, we have some other managers, and when people that are calling the shots don't really know what they want, or they are not into game development, and they are there because like their companies put them there, and they're trying their best to do what they're supposed to do. But usually, yeah, communicating with some managers that cannot really um, vouch for their ideas, for their calls. Usually, having too many cooks in the kitchen, that's what makes the project harder, I believe. Lacking some serious and committed leadership. You're muted, Matthieu.
Every time. On my side, I'd say the easiest projects are the ones where communication is very clear, because people often underestimate the importance of being able to explain something clearly and make it sure that everybody has the same understanding of a project and the execution of a project, or even the time frame that you should be working with on any kind of game is very important in my sense. I would say also that one hard thing to estimate, even for seasoned devs, is the completion time of any project, because you always go and guesstimate what's going to happen, but there are a lot of factors that could totally ruin your schedule. So the best thing to make sure that your project could still hold water if something very bad happened is to have everybody at almost the same level of understanding of what's happening, because yeah, I don't that it happens, but sometimes people can leave projects, and if it's a key people in the project, it can totally bail it out. It can totally cancel the whole project. Whereas if you're working as a team and the vision is shared between multiple people, there's still a possibility to save it and to keep the spirit of the game alive. Of course, if it's possible, if the people or even the one person that left is still okay for you to work on this ID without him or her. And I'd say overall, even if it really depends on the skill of your team, but anything that involves multiplayer and online, for me, has been something that can be the most complicated thing on Earth to develop, because it expands and demultiplies the risks and the number of bugs that you can encounter. Also, the audience is very different, and making something that is multiplayer, even for local multiplayer, sometimes can be a bit more and even way more harder than doing a straight single player or local cooperative mode with 2 people.
Which are the most common needs for teams and teammates? Yeah, I'm going to just like say the same thing with the previous question. I think that leadership, communication, clear commands or unclear requests, and I think that the time allowance to actually make different people into a group, because I don't know, the first weeks people are still meeting getting to know each other, and they don't establish themselves as a functioning group after a while. So I think that during that time where everyone's meeting, getting to know each other and understanding the way that they communicate, that's a key moment to actually help develop, at least from my part, help develop key communication skills for all of them. So I would say that, yeah, my focus right now is not so much on the technical level, because I'm very lucky to work with very talented people. But even if everyone has tons of experience, it's always tricky to form the team, and I think that that's one of the most usual needs that the team have, like communication, someone that allows them also to speak and to communicate, and not making them fear that if they say something that the team is if they say something that, I don't know, goes against the client or goes against the manager, they should be able to talk about it. And even if they're wrong or even if they're right, you can always talk and communicate between people, you know. And besides that, yeah, leadership and clear goals and clear time frames, that's really key into making a group more productive.
I would say another important need that I see a lot talking with developers specifically is trust in a general sense, because it can take many forms. Of course, already putting like money on the table for any project is a form of trust, but it can be a fleeting trust if you're only there to provide funding. Of course, it's an important component, because there's a lot of things that you cannot do if you don't have the kind of expense and the kind of funds to make the project run and pay the people that are doing it. But in the case of a game jam, for example, it's a totally different paradigm, because you're going to be grouped with other people for a very short time, and you need to also identify clearly what everybody's going to do in the process, or at least to put one key role for each person. The thing that I encounter the most working with indie teams is that people have multiple hats, So, which is a good thing when you want to learn a lot of different aspects of game development. But I would say that if you want to have a cohesive team and make sure that nobody stamps on the other's prerogative or others' capabilities, and that should prevent people to try to micromanage everybody. If you're the team leader, you don't want to micromanage. You want to have a clear goal for everybody and make sure that the trust that you've put in people will be met in return. And the idea for having multiple hats is also to know what will be your core, or at least your two core strengths, and make sure that you have other people around you to take care of all the other key aspects that come into either making a game or also promoting a game after a release, because you are not always working with a publisher, you're not always working with an external partner to promote your game. And if you're going to be doing it as a studio, you want to be sure that the people that are most skilled at communication are in the best position to do so in your team. And during development, I would say it's kind of the same because the needs are often to have a strong, not monolithic, but a good basis of core pillars in your game design, in your project, that you can refer to when you don't know exactly where you're going. And if you still keep a head on your Northern Star or anything that can lead you in a good place, that's pure gold for most people.
I believe that, yeah, because the platform will give you the audience that the game is being made for, and how that audience is going to interact with the game, and all that is going to affect the design, and also affect how the project is faced. So yeah, I believe that the platform that you make or that you decide to take your game to it's really important, and it's going to affect like all all of the all of the design process, all of the artist process. Just a little, a little bit of a story. When I was working, like, I don't know, 10 years ago, we were working with some of the best artists in the country. Some of the best artists in the country weren't really used to working on mobile games because they were like this new thing, and they made some amazing art, very personal, very I wouldn't say experimental, but it was like a little bit outside the norm. So, and they were really happy with the results, and I saw that, and it broke my heart, but I had to like ask them to change it like a lot, because when you are seeing that art in what it was like an iPhone 3 at the time, you couldn't see a thing. So it was supposed to be an elephant, and uh, it was like unintelligible. It was so hard to understand what was going on. So yeah, absolutely. I think that the platform affects almost every part of the design and the development. And I'm getting a question. Any preferred platforms or platform you wish to work with? Uh, well, I've worked like 90% of my life in mobile, so I think that's that's pretty much covered. But I would like to work with some other more experimental platforms, um, even beyond VR or Oculus or stuff like that. I'm also very interested in how people that like cannot hear or they cannot see, how they approach gaming, how they find games attractive. So I would really very much like to work on platforms that are for any kind of disabled people.
Regarding the dependency of projects on platforms, I would say that I read a very interesting blog post a few years ago, which was written by one of the creators of FRAxARG, is an American company, but which is also very distributed. They're working with a lot of people. They've been doing almost everything, maybe except VR, but they worked on mobile, PC, console projects. And I would say that the blog post was very adamant about the fact that the market is also shaping the type of game that you can make in your current situation. So I would say that games are dependent to a great extent on the platform they are made for in the first place. But the key thing that was drawn out of that blog post was that there's always space to adapt, and studios are particularly in need of being flexible these days, which can be very exhausting also, because choosing a main platform today is way more complicated than maybe 20 or 30 years ago, where you didn't have that much choice in terms of machines. On the side of controlling, I would say that we have also a good option today that allows to have a level of granularity in terms of control, because you have a lot of different controllers. Even some of them are fixed by players because they need to adapt to things that were not made for them in the first place. Microsoft has shown a lot of work on that front with diverse solution and adaptive controllers that can work for disabled people, that can work also for people who are not disabled but prefer to play in a different way. Of course, it's always more work for the developers, especially if you do it in the late stage of production. But if you think from the beginning about your main interaction and the way you're going to be asking people to interact with the game, you also have less dependency on the device, because you can find solution to mitigate the risk of having only one tunnel vision into your game design. Make sure that people could be able to enjoy it even if they don't play it as intended as the normal situation. But yeah, overall, I would say that in terms of platform dependency, it's always at one time easier to work for one specific platform because you know exactly what you want to do. But it's always good to keep in mind that your game could have maybe another life in a different form. And if you have something that is kind of modular, especially in terms of UX and UI, you're much more prepared for adaptation that could be needed along the way, even for the game itself.
Can you tell us about your expectations for being published? No. Honestly, as working, uh, I'm not really very interested in that part of the business myself. Um, I I always tend to stand more on the creative inception and development side. That's my main focus, and it has been like ever since I started. Um, as a as a as an individual, I think that I can provide my expertise better in that part of the development, like since its inception until it's finished. So I really leave all the publishing details to people that are more capable and have more knowledge about that part of the process. For me, I'm more of a I love game design, but I don't see myself like becoming a publisher or getting in contact or getting in contact with publishers to close those deals and stuff like that. I think that I always find people that are much more prepared to do stuff like that than me.
I guess I'm going to be answering the part about publishing and not being published because I have never been in the situation to ask a publisher to work with me, except when I joined Plugin Digital, but that was a very different scenario. The idea behind a publishing deal for me is that I expect the studio to let me know exactly when I'm overdoing it in some advice or maybe by being too present on with the studios. Of course, it's not a bad point to talk regularly with your publisher or your the studios that you work with, but it can be easy to let yourself sink into a conversation that goes endlessly on the design side, on the strategy for the marketing, to have long meetings that end up not being that fruitful for the project itself. And I expect developers to be able to tell me when I'm clearly stepping out of my role in some sense, because I'm very interested in game design too. That's one of the key aspect that made me come to the video game industry. And I tend to try to understand everything when I talk with developers, and it can be too much question sometimes. So I would say if you need time off without people asking you things about a lot of different aspects of the game production, you need to be able to say it clearly and say, okay, for the next 2 weeks, we are not going to be able to answer to anything. We're going to just do our thing with the creative aspect. And that's part of the partly related to the trust thing that I was talking about. You need to be able to tell truth to everybody and them not being angry about it. So I'm really open to criticism on that side. And in terms of jam games or jam teams, what I expect from them because that's, I think, the subject that we're here for. I expect them to highlight at least one core aspect of their design, because in a game jam, unless you're doing a very specific one where you have 1 month to go and work on it, even if it's still a tight deadline, if you're working on a game and make up something, I want to be able to identify very clearly the strength of the project and what was the leading idea, and everything that revolves around that, and expanded from the very core principle that you wanted to show to the rest of the developers, the rest of the people who will be playing the game. And it's also important that teams from the game jam have at least one person that is able to articulate that idea clearly for the people. Of course, you want to play the game and understand that, but if there are other ideas that came up and were just barely touched in your game, I expect people to be able to let me know what was the intention behind that.
Okay, so please exchange some impressions and or words, tips, or encouraging words for the teams. Okay, tips for groups. I think one of the most important things that you're going to be doing there is, besides working on a game, is getting to know people, learning how to work with people, learning how to communicate with people and tell them their idea sucks and yours doesn't. um, Communicate that in a respectful way, and when you realize that your idea is the one that sucks, you have to step down and say, yeah, I'm sorry, that was a really bad idea. I think that's one of the key aspects, or I think people come to the jams willing to probably get to know people or to make a game, but I would say that for me, the most important things when I was working with teams on game jams or participating in game jams is to know people, chat with people, know their stories, and learn how to form a group in such a short time. So I'd say that's one of the key things that I wouldn't like for you guys to ignore, like the human component and what you're going to be learning from other people.
It's for me, it's also important not to have a too competitive mindset in game jam, because over the years there has been a lot of jams that have been running around, and a lot of people try to find validation of their work in this kind of places, and sometimes it can become even something that's associated with professional experience. Of course, it's part of your experience as a developer, for sure. But in the same way that when you're a student in any school of any type, not just for game design, you're there to learn, and you're there to experiment and try things that you probably won't be able to experience later. So take profit of these kind of free spaces where you can try things. Even if it doesn't work in the end, you will have learned something valuable for other projects in the future. And try to not spend too much time, arguing about is it a good or a bad idea, because in a jam you don't have time for that. You need to be sure, of course, that your core idea has some legs, but once you have set up on that and on the engine, for example, then you're going to be willing to make sure that you can create as much content as possible and pack it in a good way. So it's important to have something that can drive you for during that amount of free time. So pick it wisely, and also I would say try to sleep a bit because that's the usual hurdle for game jam. Of course, you can spend 2 days without sleeping and keep making a game, and in the end, maybe it will be better than if you hadn't slept. But most of the time, unless you're working by yourself, and even when you're working by yourself, a lack of sleep is totally wrecking your thought capability, and a lot of things can slip in the cracks, even when you're rested. So imagine if you don't have enough sleep, like coding without enough sleep is something terrible. And it's easy to overlook a key aspect of your game design if you don't have a rested mind. So sleep at least 2-3 hours each day, and maybe more if you can.